Yes, the email has been sent. Did y'all get it?
They can't hear you, JFlow. The stream couldn't hear you. Okay, they can hear you now. Did you all hear any of the intro? There's like a 5-second delay between when they hear it and when we said it.
Yes, the email has been sent. Did y'all get it?
They can't hear you, JFlow. Okay, so we haven't said anything in like 10 seconds. Can you hear us talking now?
Yes, I can hear you.
On the stream? Not on the stream. Couldn't hear you. Okay, they can hear you now. Flow.
Yes. Is anyone not ready? Cool. Context: the United States program should defund and disband Immigration and Customs Enforcement (ICE). Immigration and Customs Enforcement (ICE) is engaged in an ethnic cleansing campaign geared towards eradicating brown and black immigrants from the United States. ICE platform relies on racist rhetoric that immigrants are a threat to national security. McLean 18. ICE is an agency devoted to breaking up families. The agency talks about threats to human beings like they are animals. Defunding ICE has gained traction among immigrant rights communities. The agency ramped up the deportation. ICE is terrorizing Americans' communities. ICE abolition quickly meets extreme skeptical everywhere. Mainstream political discourse a huge blind spot. The goal of abolishing the agency is to abolish the function. ICE has become a threat to democracy. The agency increased surveillance of communities of color, immigrant communities under the DHS and communities. ICE platform relies on racist rhetoric that immigrants are a threat to national security. Still use anti-immigrant sentiments. Obama presided over aggressive deportation. The central assumption in 2008 is that undocumented immigrants are a threat. ICE modules operate bears a resemblance to the strategy proposed by white supremacist Taylor. The agency has been a target of political opponents, has been worked towards deporting individuals for speaking to social media about ICE. The call to abolish ICE is the demand for the Democratic Party to seriously resisting the unbridled white supremacy surveillance state that has handed in creating white supremacy is no longer the center of immigration. The debate in the American immigration discussion. The left has no voice next to death, being stripped from family, home, and community is the worst fate being inflicted. A human is time to rein in an unaccountable strike force executing campaign of ethnic cleansing and maintaining the ICE perpetuates racial profiling and human rights violation in service of the white supremacist agenda. Duncan 18. ICE is doing what is built to do, decriminalizing immigrants, separating families, and terrifying undocumented immigrants. Administration blames and outrages immigrants who distract from the harm inflicting everywhere. The ICE is the agency of white nationalism, acting out xenophobia and racism. ICE deported approximately 226,000 people. ICE is racist based on racial profiling. ICE is an undocumented person as a threat has been charged repeatedly for racial profiling. More than 20 immigrant activists have been arrested by ICE since Trump took office. ICE violates human rights. 1,224 complaints were filed by those immigrant detention for sexual and physical abuse, and the stakes couldn't be higher. White supremacy is responsible for massive global violence and oppression and continual acceptance for human extinction. Communism 13. White supremacy is one of the nefarious ideology global and be responsible for well over 100 million deaths that destroys science programming is real to believe that white people use the US as a society and destroys the lives of people of color, African, blacks, indigenous, Latino, brown communities are systematically targeted, mass incarceration, to prison, industrial complex, and police brutality, all lethal aspects has only white supremacy is a social issue that has only gotten stronger, more destructive, weirdest forms are ultimately justified by white supremacy and capitalism has given birth to apartheid, Jim Crow, mass murder, chattel slavery. This literally goes on. Humanity depends our collective in commitment to end it before the metasizes and puts it all to the end, and the affirmative calls to the end of defunding to ICE, as well as dismantling the legislation that supports the agency. Any reform to deportation fails and should be outright rejected. Matthew 18. Disband the agency. We need to establish a commission to examine the abuses perpetrated by ICE. Let's create a future free of ICE, free of responsibility that our president will have to take a police force solely purpose on terrorizing immigrants communities. We need legislation. We do not need ICE to be reformed. We need it to be gone. We need people to be free. And reform is not good enough. Abolition leads to a freer society that is good and opens the door for more progressive policies. McChana and Maher 18. We are used to abolitionist language that is really extreme, yet we claim to root because of the brutality of ICE. We should historicise ICE is not as old. Abolishing it should not be that difficult. It is determined to demand that. Last thing we need to do is see ICE is replaced, which is not good enough. We needed rollback powers that have been granted to the Border Patrol. We needed radical transformation that points to a broader abolition. It's easy to abolish ICE. We need to abolish it in a way that builds a different kind of world in which way other kinds of abolition. We want a very different kind of society. And abolition solves the racial animosity towards immigrant communities and rejects white supremacy. Ellen 18. But ICE was created in 2003 under the umbrella of DHH, which was signify immigration and consequent a matter of national security, highly racialized sentiment, no accountability. This is very little institution knowledge of that history of due process. We're seeing them destroy records of sexual assault. We see deaths that have gone uninvestigated because this agency not designed to be held accountable. Trump is using ICE for what they've been intended to, ethnic cleansing. ICE, along with CBP, regardless of who sits in the Oval Office, will always be immune and racist detention and deportation mechanism, code for maintenance of white supremacist state. The very concept of illegal immigrants, a racist fiction set placed upon racist officials who ideology is ingrained in our immigration status. Immigration status doesn't goes beyond it anymore. President is about the very roots of our modern day immigration system. Should not accept it. We do not accept white supremacy as unshameful. We cannot keep watching. There's no excuse for being part of a Abolishing movement resist upon white supremacy ideology. Trump wants to keep in place forever. And fails to speak out against ICE makes us morally complicit to its ethnic cleansing campaign. Loomis 17. So long as we do not speak against this agency, we are culpable with ethnic cleansing to our nation, and our demands to hashtag abolish ICE is essential, even though it's unnecessary, insufficient to solve all violence. Loomis 18. Abolishing ICE doesn't solve all governmental security forces. Abolishing ICE is a necessity. Starting over with our entire immigration infrastructure is a critical program. Hashtag abolish ICE is a great slogan to motivate the democratic base, and there's a civil moral obligation to doing the plan anything else except violence. 17. ICE is becoming the police force for engaging nativist campaign to criminalize and dehumanize immigrant communities. ICE engage in human rights violations and from sexual assault to kidnapping children. ICE is better upon violence across the country by turning all law enforcement agency into oppressive tentacles, enforcing laws that build upon white anxieties against people of color. It created a system that punishes undocumented immigrants and entangled them into a prison industrial complex and removed them from a country after exploiting their labor. It's a moral obligation to rise up and abolition from grassroots organizers to rising left. It's time to abolish ICE now. This liberating model ensures the dehumanization is happening to our immigrant community ends. And that's it.
All right, are we ready for cross-ex? Can the stream hear me now? I think I figured out why my mic wasn't picking up. We'll figure it out. Cross-ex.
Just give me 1 second. All right, I'm ready. Is anybody not ready? Cool. My first question, how will abolishing ICE lead to stopping racism?
We're not saying that it completely solves the structures of racism, but rather that ICE is one of the main platforms in which that it is it coexists with the way that white supremacy is maintained, and it further expands like forms of settler colonialism in which that it kind of determines who belongs here and not. And that is kind of like the maintenance in which that like violence keeps on recurring, in which like they use it to maintain their dominance.
Okay, next question. How will abolishing ICE lead to more humane immigration policy?
So kind of like that part of the evidence, we won't like directly like kind of argue about the futurity of immigration policy, but rather kind of like the way that people are being biopolitically controlled right now through our current immigration policies is problematic, and that in the future we should kind of abolish these certain systems that is able to. So
you're saying that we should abolish these future systems, or you saying that like, the AF will directly lead to the abolition of these systems? The
AF will lead to the abolition of these systems.
How?
So like kind of like in the last part about hashtag abolish ICE, it is kind of like great towards motivating the democratic base. We'll also read more 2AC pieces of evidence that's very good on how it is. Does
the democratic base want humane immigration reform? Does the democratic base want
like
humane immigration
AOC
reform?
Like AOC is like an example.
Are all democratic politicians like AOC?
No.
Cool, thanks. Moving on. Why? I just want to know, let's say this plan is actually proposed as a bill in real life. Do you think either Trump or Biden would ever sign it into law without immediately replacing ICE with an identical agency?
We won't defend the
Like
futurity.
in real life,
We won't
outside
defend
of the
the
debate
futurity.
round.
We don't defend the futurity of the state.
So you're saying that they're in. So you're saying within the debate rounds, you're saying that it's possible that you abolish ICE, but then it's immediately replaced with an identical agency.
One, we say that like using the use of fiat to create educational like moments, especially within communities like UDLs, where a lot of people are watching, talking about issues like abolishing ICE is very good towards creating a place towards abolishing these different systems of repression. Like,
cool. Does the plan stop all deportations from happening?
ICE is one of the major ones. No. ICE is one of the major ones in which that it keeps like
no deportations will happen in this hypothetical fiat. In the hypothetical fiat world, no deportations will happen after the passage of the act.
Like of course we don't solve for like all these things, but rather like the maintenance of white supremacy, like forms of like white supremacies expanded through ICE.
Okay. Post AF, will U.S. American attitudes towards immigration be transformed?
Like that's like that won't like happen in the real world, but rather education within like this round and to people abroad is necessary to change these issues.
Thank you.
Awesome. So the negative, I'm gonna give you a couple minutes to prep, and then we could make some comments. And I've got like a couple windows open. Let me send you there. All right, so the breakout rooms are open if you want to go in there.
Rachel, are you good? Do you want prep?
I think she just jumped into it already. Yeah, cool. So I'll just start that. We'll give them like a couple minutes and check in on them. All right, Joseph, what do you think? How's that 1AC? Is it structured well? What would you change?
I think the 1AC was good. There's a lot of repetitious moments on the bottom of the debate or the bottom of the 1AC that could have been done differently. I think that this AF honestly needs a little bit more of solvency and less more of the ethnic cleansing. If you all were keeping up, the word ethnic cleansing occurred in like 4 or 5 different cards. I know it's an important issue, but the warrants for it are really well explained on the first card. I don't need to really like delve into the other portions, though it might help in later impacting out as to why the stuff, why talking about this within the AF is a good idea.
All right. I also agree to that. And I think in the cross-ex, it starts to highlight the lack of solvency in the 1AC, where Sophia's press on Cuban in terms of like, what does this look like after we vote AF, or how does that impact immigration? And her great examples about if Trump is there, right? Wouldn't he just like create a new system about that? So I think a lot of the debate's gonna go in that direction. Cool.
Right.
Anyone in the chat have any questions or comments?
The one thing I would have liked from the improvement of the neg is to kind of start the indite as to where the framework debate is going to go, because a lot of it has always just been, so what do you solve, right? Instead of why is that idea of education within the debate space that you're talking about isn't accessible, like getting into the framework debate from the very get-go so that it sounds a lot more persuasive once it is introduced and into the later speeches.
Great ideas. Cool. So that was 2 minutes of prep. I'm going to bring them back in here and see if they're ready. And then...
All right, I just sent it out to everybody, so once you receive it, let me know. It's the same one that we said earlier, but this one's PDF file, so I didn't have any comments on it. But yeah.
All right. Next up, we've got the 1NC. I'll start the time on your word.
All right. Go ahead now. So starting on case, first of all, there's no solvency. The government would immediately replace ICE with a functionally identical agency, and the harms will continue. You can't fiat that the government won't do this. Fiat only gives the ability to imagine the world of the aft. They can't fiat what the government will do for the rest of the time. Also, the state just finds smarter ways to ruin lives. For example, the 13th Amendment was supposed to abolish slavery, but the state continued to enslave Black people through penal labor. Next, abolished ICE is not a complete policy proposal and doesn't change broader immigration laws. Sure, 18. The abolished ICE movement doesn't have an actual proposal for what should replace ICE, or even if it should be replaced at all. But it's not that simple. Abolishing an agency doesn't abolish immigration laws, and some abolished ICE advocates dance around questions of if those laws could be changed, would be enforced. Next, also on solvency, no solvency, immigration detention centers and Border Patrol agents under the jurisdiction of CBP outlined in their own L-18 card will continue to exist post-AF and will continue to deport immigrants and cause those same violations or same violence. Also, again, no solvency. Removing one's agency cannot solve for white supremacy or racial animosity against undocumented immigrants. They can't solve for literally any of their impacts or any of the harms they delineate in the first constructive. Moving on to the K. The nation-state organization of immigrants and indigenous people into the multicultural system of contractual rights serves to pave over questions over difference and white supremacy. Settler nationalism is the most relevant framework for addressing violence stemming from civil society, Cornelia 15. In the USA, the Indian is the original enemy combatant who cannot be grieved on account of their originality in the pre-political and pre-sovereign past. The denial of indigenous peoples' indigeneity to the Americas ultimately designate them as a first wave of the yellow peril invasion that invested lands. For America to lawfully become native land for the self-made settlers, indigenous peoples need to be either dead or early migrants / foreigners within a melting pot of immigrants. In either case, they must be located outside of U.S. manifest aspirations. Because the perplexity surrounding identity in the new nation relates to an anxiety born out of the West folding back over the territory of its otherness, the settler colony asks of its subjects a constant back and forth movement on either side of the border, separating the self from the other. Celebration of the USA as a nation of immigrants also fails to challenge the forms of white privilege and entitlement that has authorized the sovereign state of exception in its relation to those who are from here or from there next to the Indian. To be from here in the liberal multicultural settler colony is to become a contracting subject. And for the non-immigrant native who was rather than is already here, such coming and becoming is a trajectory of in time and history. To attain a civilization potential to contract into rights, freedom, and government, this exercise may be deferred to in the promise of equality that allows the racial and settler contract to be amalgamated to liberalism's performative and self-legitimizing gesturing towards the production of justice and rights. To talk about immigration in light of the settlements, indigeneity, and origins can never be simply talking about cultural differences, nor about citizenship or civil rights as incorporative frameworks. It is always and also talking about sovereignty, that uncitable thing in the settler colony. These conversations truly align instead with the political, thus inducing a stutter in liberalism's rhetorical deflection of whiteness and an egalitarian and mutually contracted fantasy of post-racial futurity grounded in the geopolitical self-evidence of Euro-American sovereignty. Next, framing immigration reform as a chance for freedom allows for the legacy of indigenous displacement and genocide that makes things like freedom and justice possible. Volt 15. Here we must point to the convergence of the liberal social contract with the logic of settlement, as well as the confluence of settlerism with immigration, both literally and metaphorically. Both the permanent movement of communities and the reproduction of communities are necessarily involved in settler colonialism. The unique settler ideology of the United States required migration under a system that constituted economic independence as the basis of free citizenship. We might think about the relationship of the settler contract with immigration, but not just in terms of bodies needed for the settler project, but also in terms of the metaphorical relationship between immigration and settlerism. As the notion of settlerism becomes unsavory, settlers portray themselves as immigrants, particularly as forming a nation of immigrants. Immigrants are treated as the agents of founding and renewal for a regime in which membership is supposed to be uniquely consent-based, individualist, rational, and voluntarist rather than inherited and organic. If American is a product of free choice, the violent sources of the Republic are recentered on the idea of choice, continually reaffirmed by the figure of the immigrant consenting to membership of the regime. The desiring of America eclipses the dispossession by America. The dispossession disappears, buried underneath the vision of America as a land of equality and liberty. Thus, the native familial identity of the settlers is both proclaimed and premised on the disappearance of the actual native inhabitants. This imagining away banishes existing inhabitants to the margins of its consciousness. In turning into a settler native, the settler must show some relationship to the soil, suggesting an autochthonous relationship that would justify the idea that this land was made for you and me. This allows settler society to spring organically from the local soil, although through appropriating the symbolism of the very aboriginality that is historically effaced. The nation of immigrants metaphor suggests that immigrants to the United States are the heirs of their forefathers who made the settler contract in relationship to virgin land. This contract was founded in a purported right of inherited descent and providential destiny from the founding fathers whose alien status goes unrecognized, even while indigenous populations are made aliens. If one searches for visual representation of the nation of immigrants, one finds images of the borders of the continental United States filled by people by smiling multicultural faces. What this does is remove the focus from the role of the state and the function of the state in establishing a gatekeeping nation, a deportation nation, or a settler colonial state. Immigration is responsible for indigenous dispossession, but it provides the alibi. Thus, immigration functions as both the reason for and basis of denial. The settler state is naturalized as the nation of immigrants. Next, treating settler violence as a thing of the past creates a history that enables the violence of white futurity. Knowing the past comes to be equated with the end of violence. Tuck and Gus Tambide, Fernandez 13. Settler colonial curricular project of replacement is invested in settler futurity. When we look at the present of settler colonialism as only the production of the past, we overlook how settler colonialism is configured in relation to the future. The futurity refers to the ways in which the future is rendered knowable through specific practices and in turn intervenes upon the present. We seek to emphasize the ways in which replacement is entirely concerned with the settler futurity, which always indivisibly means the continued and complete eradication of the original inhabitants of contested land. Anything that seeks to recuperate and not interrupt settler colonialism, to reform the settlement and incorporate indigenous peoples into the multicultural settler and colonial nation is fettered to settler futurity. Our commitments are to what might be called an indigenous futurity, which does foreclose settler colonialism and settler epistemologies. Next, the alternative is to burn down the state. Only by engaging in an unquestioning and profound social revolution of refusing the state can we create the conditions necessary to decolonize. Catherine Kelly, Abraham 18. The fantasy of radically changing political structures from within is simply not a viable political option for those concerned with the ultimate destruction of the mechanisms of carnage that shape modern life and its attendant regimes of governance. The project of this piece is not to think about how to make life more livable under current regimes of power or to ponder building something new or altered in the state's place. We imagine alternative worlds based in the total abolition of these regimes, which render profound social transformation impossible. We believe that it is by no means extreme to posit that one solution to these ills is to destroy, to burn down contemporary institutions of governance, policing, and comfort, to cooperatively dismantle the workings of the state. A radical project of abolition and insurgent political praxis refuses to negotiate with the state or seek recognition from any of its bureaucratic apparatuses. Political projects of compromise with the state have proven insufficient. And that's all for my speech.
All right. Cross-X, are y'all ready?
Yes.
I'll start it on the first question.
Okay. Does the alternative lead to a version or policy like the 1AC?
When you're asking that, do you mean decolonization? Because that's what our
is it like a floating pick? That's what I'm asking.
Floating pick? No, it's literally calling to burn down the state. While your plan actively attempts to
question. Let's get started on the alternative then. At the very last part of your card, it says, for us, a radical project of abolition, blah, 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 refuses to negotiate with the state. Like, why isn't the 1AC a version of the abolition that refuses to negotiate with the state?
The 1AC requires the state to actually function. What you guys are calling for is the United States federal government to actually abolish ICE. Which
why does it require the state to function?
I'm sorry?
Why does it require the state to function?
When you call on the United States federal government to do something, that's requiring the state to function as part of your plan.
Right, but wait, why does this justify or legitimize the United States federal government then?
Because you necessitate the use of the United States federal government. That's what we're saying.
Okay, so the use of the United States federal government is like the problem.
You guys are necessitating the use of the federal government to actively decolonize or to, at the very least, abolish ICE. Whereas we're saying that we could decolonize ourselves by burning down the state entirely.
Okay. Second question on your Tuck and Gasbandinas Fernandez 18 or your Tuck card.
Fernandez 13 card, yeah.
It talks about settler futurity and talks about how when we emphasize to seek to talk about the establishment and replacement of things, it kind of like leads to the diversion of any policy practice, right?
I'm sorry, what?
So the card talks about like futurity and like consideration of settler futurity, right? Like
white futurity, yes.
Will you defend that like the discussion of like white futurity is problematic?
The discussion of white futurity, we think,
kind of like consideration of white futurity, instances of considering white futurity.
Right. I think that for us, what we're saying is that white futurity in the debate space is not actually practical to actually leading to change, especially since it's off the backs of the indigenous bodies. So we're saying that we need to adopt a praxis of using decolonization in the space.
So like what instances of like white futurity is problematic? So like it's like mentioning, like for example, is like mentioning what like the government would do in the future, like an example of white futurity.
No, so in our opinion, we think that white futurity in this space is necessitating the use of the government, and also at the same time endorsing settler colonial rhetoric, where you guys call on the U.S. federal government to do something that's considered good or moral. So, that's what we're saying is bad in this
Okay.
space, where you guys
outside of like the use of the United States federal government, you also have like another link that talks about like immigration. Where do we like kind of like reaffirm how does like the 1AC reaffirms that immigrants have like a future within the United States?
I'm sorry, what?
So
How does the
and
1AC
second
reaffirm that the immigrants have a place in the United States?
Yeah.
We think that the idea that you guys can affirm that immigrants have a place in the United States is
like where do we reaffirm that?
Like
where do we reaffirm that?
You guys affirm that in the whole thing about how we shouldn't deport people because that's calling violence and separating of families. That's like claiming that you guys have a place in the United States.
And that's time. Nice job. Okay. So, Af, I'm going to go ahead and let you kick over to your prep room, whatever you need to do. Okay. I'll give you 2 minutes just to start.
If we don't like need prep.
Yeah, we're still taking. We're still taking.
It's fine. It's fine, Cuban.
Okay.
Don't worry about it. You're fine. All right. Cool. All right. So, Joseph, how are we feeling about that one?
This is going to be a fun debate, I think, especially on the link level and the permutation level and on the alternative level as to which will do some sort of action for indigenous peoples.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely going to become more central part of the debate because I feel like both sides sort of agree that the system is messed up, but who's going to have the better job articulating that stuff? I definitely liked how the 1NC opened with some real quick jabs at that solvency, kind of like how you commented earlier that that's clearly the weakest part of the AF. So I think they did a really good job sort of starting off there. Yeah.
Right. I also think that how the case is applied to the set call critique is going to make a big difference as to whether the AF or the neg gets the ballot in this debate, and how the AF handles the turns, which are basically just more set call links, within the 2AC and in the future speeches in this round.
Definitely, it'll be a good debate. Hey, let me pull them back in because it seemed like Cuban was anxious to get started. You all good to go? You can come back.
Yeah, we're good.
What's the order?
The order will be an overview on case proper, and then the K. Everyone got that? Right. Right. Let's go. This is the government's lapdog to enforce continual settler colonial logics of who belongs on this land and who doesn't. The 1AC problematizes the securitization of the state that maintains white supremacy through racial profiling and human rights abuse. Reform is not enough. Only through abolition it holds the state accountable for continually attempting to humanize detention centers and deportation. Anything outside of abolition and revolting against the state maintains an ethics of white supremacy that leads to mass apartheid and eventually extinction. Millions have been and will be killed, and millions of others are supposedly missing. Case proper. One and see first argument. No solvency. This fundamentally double turns the K. Conspiring about the futurity of the government about replacing ICE with something else reaffirms federalism as the next is a consideration instead of indigeneity. There will be no option to create a new agency. B. Proves our 2AC framework argument on the K. Necessitates political consideration as a prerequisite for what comes into action in the future. C. Cross-apply arguments from the settler colonialism. Okay, we'll read this later. Discussions of policies surrounding abolishing ICE creates movements and destruction of the settler state that will eventually overthrow the current order, means conservatives and Trump gets to boot. Next, they say not complete proposal, but cross-apply answers from the first answer. Literally, settler futurity in action links them to their own critique. Why do we always have to consider what would replace ICE? Leads to infinite stagnation. It should just be eliminated. All of our ethics cards from the 1AC proves why we shouldn't consider anything. Next, they said immigrant detention centers and border control. 1AC challenges how people are put in there in the first place. Cross-supply overview. We don't claim to solve these issues, but rather lead to a larger abolitionist movement that will eventually destroy the state, which includes these problematic notions. Argument 4, they said removing one agency doesn't solve. Firstly, we challenge white supremacy. It's always going to be a recurring issue in the United States, but rather what we can do and use this discussion to focus on this particular topic in debate. The important discussion about abolishing ICE leads to challenging the dominant notions of white supremacy writ large, and especially in the debate that reinforces it. Second is a link turn, eventually abolishing the state. There'll be more on the K. First is framework. We get the fiat implication of the affirmative. They get the K. You should weigh it against the 1AC offense. Prefer. First is fairness. Debate's a game. Only our interpretation gives us the only stable point of half offense that balances the scale. Any other interpretation is definitely regressive and self-serving, makes affirming impossible. Second is education. State stasis. Stable stasis, a point is necessary for clash and produces the dialogical exchange that is necessary to become better advocates outside of the round. That helps debaters overcome cognitive biases and leads to self-reflexivity. That makes us more self-aware individuals in terms of their framework. Next, status quo attempts of reforming not working doesn't mean legal solutions are useless. Infusing the ACT methodology and interrogation into legal solutions ruptures the intelligibility of settler-colonialism and creates meaningful progress and reinterpretation of the liberal rights they criticize. Vander 13. Indigenous scholars have shown to not avail ourselves of the law in the effort to ameliorate social ills. Is to abrogate one's political responsibility. The legal strategy of rupture is a political refusal that calls into question the justiciability of the purpose crime by challenging the colonial legal order. The illumination of hypocrisy. The colonial state questions the authorities. Strategy of rupture creates a political opposition in the courtroom that cannot be appropriated by the legal order. Challenging the legitimacy of the colonial legal order itself. We may be reluctant to ever claim a judgment would contaminate in manner and critique. Redefining rights to equality and subverting the interests of the state-corporal nexus is potentially ruptural. Next, the Levy vote evidence, the author would vote affirmative. She goes to Berkeley Law School and fights immigrant rights. Obviously would engage within legal practices and institutions to dismantle the settler state. Next, no link. The 1AC does not reaffirm the notions of immigration in the United States, but rather target the unethicality within ICE detention centers and racist tactics. Talking about the historical settlement of whiteness doesn't disavow the connections of indigeneity to the land, but rather we use it as a reason why the state should have control. Next, from do both. The affirmative agrees with the criticism that the history of slavery and genocide affects our institutions today. The Act takes that into account and uses the law to solve for our impacts, which is the same as the negative. Say just 17. Abolishing ICE has ruptured from social media into the occupation of federal building. We must acknowledge we sit on the occupied land, acceptance of migrants into cultural white supremacy and settler colonial mentality. We acknowledge that we must defer to indigenous people whose land we occupy to permission the state. ICE and detention centers exist as an extension of the carceral state. If we can fight for a world in which ICE is abolished, we must also be willing to fight for a world in which all prisons go away with it. The following is a manifesto for all those who dare to dream and fight for a world without cages, without borders, and for the liberation for all exploited people on this earth. Next, we are the alternative. The call for abolition of ICE that eventually spills over to complete abolition. We turn the author's disagreement with political engagement, since it's a useful strategy towards creating complete abolition of the state. Excluding these instances of potential engagement within the state excludes indigeneity who work to resist the government through legal means, such as the recent Supreme Court ruling of McGritt versus Oklahoma, which reaffirmed indigenous sovereignty over the state sovereignty on a 5-4 decision. Next, their alternative card agrees there's no one solution. However, there just cannot be any negotiation or allowing the state interest. 1NC completely rejects the idea and forwards complete abolition. 1NC evidence, Catherine Kelly Abraham, 18. By no means extreme to posit the one solution to their ills to destroy, to burn down contemporary institutional governance, policing, and comfort to cooperatively dismantle the working of the state. And success means the act can lead to a revolution which proves the K wrong. Hope and progress is possible. Ray 14. Revolutionary transformation has always happened as a dialectical interaction between rapid revolutionary movements and more institution reform-based challenges. Through its experience of struggles for reform, collective decision, and have a foretaste of what emancipation means. Struggle for reform helps prepare for revolution. And what policy agenda at one and the same time make concrete gains within capitalism, and which permits further movements against capitalism. I'm good.
All right. Are we ready
All right.
for cross-sects?
Sorry, just got myself. All right. Go ahead. So you asked us why we always ask the question of what comes after ICE. Isn't not in our place to weigh the implications of the plan?
Yeah.
The impact of the plan.
Yeah, the implications of the plan is that ICE would be abolished and ICE would not exist.
Okay, what do you solve for?
We don't necessarily solve for one issue as a whole, but we are a form of combating like racism and white supremacy.
How do you lead to a larger abolitionist movement?
So it's a domino effect. Since we are advocating for abolition of ICE, being able to call for ICE being removed leads to other people becoming advocates and other people advocating for the abolition of the state.
Did the abolishment of slavery lead to more abolition?
I think using slavery as a analogy is pretty bad because people of color did not write the 13th Amendment. It was white people who wrote it, so it's not the same.
Who would be writing this law into existence?
It would be like people of color who are advocating for the abolition of
the person who's signing off on it is white, though, is it not the case?
Sure, but we're demanding it. We're making this white person do it.
Oh, can you
also explain, when we lead to a revolution?
I'm sorry, one sec.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Is this a tag team cross-sex out of curiosity? It's fine if it is. I just didn't know.
Yeah, no.
Go on.
Okay. On the link turn on the K, can you explain that? I didn't catch that.
The where?
You said link turn on the K we would eventually abolish.
Oh yeah. So the link turn on the K is that abolishing ICE is the first step in abolishing the rest of the government.
Okay. I hear you. You said that you are the alternative. How are you the alternative if you use a settler colonialist state?
See, the thing is we don't use the state as in the state is doing stuff, but we're demanding from the state to dismantle itself.
Is the state not doing something in regards to abolishing ICE?
Yes, if we tell the state to abolish ICE, it's literally it destroying itself, which is a step in the right direction.
It destroying itself. Okay, thank you. You said that we had to acknowledge whose land we live on. What do we do after that acknowledgement? Just continue? That was your
no.
CYJA 17 card. You said we acknowledge the land we live on, and then we use that to apply law.
Yeah, we acknowledge the land we live on, and after that we apply, which abolishing ICE is a form of decolonization.
How is abolishing ICE a form of decolonization?
Because ICE is a form of that spreads the settler colonial mindset, i.e. how there's a lot of indigenous people who are dying in ICE constraints. So if we are able to remove ICE, that's a form of solving for violence against indigenous folks.
All right, thank you. Just next prep.
Yep. The rooms should be open if you want to enter them.
I can't see it. Oh.
Oh, hey, it's just us. Look at that. And put my clock on there.
Huh, interesting.
Huh.
Interesting indeed.
I was going one way, and that cross-X definitely flipped some of my opinions.
Yeah. So I think the 2AC itself was very good on the settler colonialism debate. I think that cross-X was a little bit confusing because some of the words that were spoken by the 2AC don't actually affirm what the 2AC wants to do itself. I don't know if the neg will catch this. They might, but there's still a way out for them because the cards, especially I think on the permutation and after the permutation itself, is just like perm do the AF. And I think perm do the AF would have been the better permutation in this debate because there are definitely disads to the alternative that should have been read that were not read in this debate.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree there. And sorry, I'm just looking at the chat. Not sure what they're referring to. Oh, they're looking at my picture. Okay. Yeah, no, I definitely agree there. It's gonna be interesting to see where this alt versus case debate goes, and it was kind of interesting. Jonathan felt like he was digging himself into a little bit of a hole about begging white people and having the state destroy itself and these kind of terms. I definitely think a better understanding of what the evidence he had read in the 2AC.
Right.
Him, stand a little bit stronger there. Cool.
Right. And I think a lot of this will have to do with the explanation of the alternative in the block as to whether or not, like, can we really look at what the action of the alternative is in terms of burning it down? Because if you read the evidence, I think how they will explain it to what the evidence says is going to be different because it always is in this sort of debate.
Yeah, the spin's always going to depend on how that looks, especially in the 1AR and later in the debate. Great. Let's see how the neg is doing.
Okay, we have to go back.
Oh, no rush.
Okay, cool.
I was just checking if y'all needed anything.
If it's not, can we get like 30 more seconds?
Oh yeah, of course.
Good, thank you.
Oh, cool. Are
Yeah,
you
just come
winning
back whenever
some?
you're ready, and we'll start. No rush.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just not sure how to communicate it best, but cool.
Mm-hmm.
Flow that I always flow on because I flow cross X. It's just one of my judge things.
Great. They'll be back soon. They should be connecting in just a moment. So while I've got a second, shout out to everyone tuned in. Thank you all for tuning in, whether you're tuned in because you're part of camp and your lab leader said this would be a good idea, or you're someone who's just hanging out and wanting to do more debate stuff in the evening. Thank you all for tuning in. Let's see. Oh, here they come. It's been a close debate so far. Let's see how the block goes.
I'm sorry, I'm still sending it, so
No worries.
figure out how to like reply all. Okay, it is sent. Yeah. Have y'all received it yet, or? Okay, cool. Is anybody? Let me set my time. Then I will be ready. All right. Is anybody not ready?
I'll start when you start.
Cool. Time starts. Or actually, I'll do an overview I'll do a roadmap first. It's gonna be a framework on the K. I'll just be handling the K framework, links, impact, alts. My partner will take the rest. And time starts now. The U.S. is a settler colonial state that necessitates the genocide of indigenous people to maintain its sovereignty. This implicates the act because the 1AC tries to reform the structure instead of rejecting it, allowing the settler state to appear benevolent, incorporate other marginalized people into the settler projects, and continue the dispossession and violence against Native people to perpetually maintain its power. If we win that the U.S. is a settler colonial country predicated on violence and genocide, then the act can never be ethical because it offers the U.S. a chance at redemption that comes at the cost of Native lives. Any future imagined by the 1AC is one coated with the blood of indigenous people whose very existence threatens the state and whose continued dispossession and genocide is necessitated for the state's continued sovereignty. First on framework. 1, we meet. The app can weigh the impacts of immigration policy against the centuries-long, still ongoing genocide of indigenous people. Under their framework, we still outweigh the app. Our alt is not unclear. We reject the entire premise of the app and call for us to take a whole new direction and work outside of the state for decolonization. Fuck the settler state. We say burn that shit down. What's unclear about that? For our interpretation, the affirmative should have to defend the epistemological foundations of the affirmative before weighing the desirability of implementation. You should vote for the team that best disrupts settler colonial structures. This is best for education because 1, fiat is illusory. The app is totally unrealistic, would never happen in real life. The alt may be unrealistic too, but recent civil uprisings make our alt more possible than ever getting Biden or Trump to abolish ICE or reform immigration in any way the app wants. Therefore, fiat in the app is not the most educational and leads to flawed policymaking. The epistemology and knowledge production we gain from debating the settler colonial foundation of the plan is the most portable skill we get from the rounds. Our education is better. It's better to critique settler colonialism than spend time learning about abolishing ICE, which may be a noble cause, from a policy mindset. Moving on, B, fairness. It's fair to assume that the app should justify why they think policymaking is the best starting point, even if that policymaking is under, especially if that policymaking is under a settler colonial state. And fairness is arbitrary. Policy debate is never a level playing field. And even so, we have a clear alt the app can answer. The app has infinite prep and knows that the 1AC is vulnerable to the very popular cycle. Okay, it's fair to assume they'd be ready for it. And K debate is good because the neg means the ability to check racist, sexist, homophobic, or otherwise discriminatory apps. We improve scholarship. We check bad sec call scholarship and therefore improve the debate space. Moving on to the links. First link, their framework interpretation links by reproducing the same settler rhetoric of which arguments and voices are acceptable within the debate round. They reject any radical methods and force all parties to engage with the settler state to solve, therefore rejecting any opportunity for true decolonization before you even start the round. Second, on the multiculturalism link, the goal of the app, according to the 1AC and CrossX, is to create a country more accepting of immigrants. This links back to the KB because it allows the state to pretend it is being ethical while ignoring the fact that for this liberal multiculturalism to exist, it must exist on stolen land, and the original inhabitants of that land must be erased. The 1AC draws other people of color into the settler nationalist project. 3, on the homogenization link, they homogenize struggles against settlerism and white supremacy. While these struggles are related, they are not the same, and pretending that they are is a settler route to innocence that muddles the meaning of what it means to decolonize and dodges questions about land and occupation. This blocks the path to true decolonization, allowing the violence to continue. On the moral obligation link, they admit the app is insufficient to solve all violence, that's straight from their Loomis card, but still claim a moral duty to vote app. They allow the settler state to take the woke high ground without actually decolonizing and being held responsible for the ongoing violence against indigenous bodies that the alt demands. The human rights link, they say we need Border Patrol to be a humanitarian force. This call to reimagine immigration enforcement as a more humane agency by eliminating only one extension of it is a settler move to innocence that allows the state to seem like it solves for xenophobic violence. Meanwhile, the state renews settler ideals of who can and cannot be a citizen on stolen land. You can extend Cornelia 15 here. That becomes a self-legitimizing promise of equality that enables settlers to dispossess indigenous bodies in the first place and today. Next, on the freedom link, they said ICE, quote, ICE abolition leads to a freer society. That's good and opens the door for more progressive policies. This rhetoric justifies the existence of the state to improve itself and necessitates future state action instead of decolonization. What is freedom predicated on? What is freedom when it is predicated on the continued displacement and genocide of indigenous peoples? Moving on to the impact, you can extend our Tuck and Gats Tambide Fernandez 13 card here, treating settler colonialism as a historical event instead of an ongoing structure that affects our policy today, allows the state to continue current and future settler violence against all indigenous people. Any moves to reform policy justify and normalize this violence. If you vote app, you're justifying the thousands of Navajo people dead from radiation poisoning, the high levels of poverty and disease among indigenous people, the deliberate destruction of family ties, and the continued colonization and possession of native lands for the sake of one policy policy that doesn't even solve what it claims to solve for. Moving on to the alt, you can extend our Catherine Kelly Abraham 18 card. We advocate for the total destruction of the settler state. They're misreading our card here. They are not complete abolition. Just because they're abolishing ICE does not mean that they are abolishing the state. They don't abolish the government, and that's what we're talking about. It's impossible to reform a structure that necessitates the continual genocide and erasure of Native people for its existence and operation. Only by burning down the state and rejecting the premise of the resolution can we accomplish true decolonization, because the state will never be complicit in its own destruction. As long as the state exists, settler hegemony persists. Only dismantling the structures of society can result in fundamental change. This is our Kosasa 04 card. There is a vast difference between reforming a state and overturning it. There is a fundamental distinction reconstituting settler hegemony and ending it. If one believes reforms can end the American predatory policies and culture, then one does not understand the vast scope of hegemony with its interlocking structures. Improving policies does not change the domination of the ruling class. Revolutionary change in state power means creating new political, economic, and social structures. Judges, reform has never led to revolution or decolonization. I challenged the affirmative during their 1AR to bring up one example of a revolution that was started by state action or engaging with the state. Understanding that the state must be rejected is key to every successful revolution. And that's time. That's what I have.
For the folks on the call, do y'all still see the timer, or do I got to reshare it?
I don't see the timer.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries.
Cool. You should have it now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, process. All right. First question: how's the affirmative abolishing ICE not like? How is that not a form of abolishing the settler state?
So when we talk about abolishing the settler state, we mean it. We mean actually tearing down, burning down the state. If you're engaging with the state and you're saying, okay, we are going to end this one policy, please government, please end this policy for me. That is not abolishing the settler state. In fact, that's giving the settler state credibility, and using these like liberal policies as like justification for like, no, we still need the state to exist because look at this, they abolished ICE, they're going to improve themselves, and that's how they justify continuing to displace indigenous people and continuing the genocide against indigenous people in this country.
Cool. So why should we not focus on like kids in cages at the southern border and focus more on like, why is that not a good focus? Like, how does the alternative solve for like the physical violence that's happening to this like even like Guatemalan indigenous children in cages?
Great. So if there is no state, there is no ICE. If there's no ICE, there's no one there to maintain these detention facilities, and there's no one there to decide who is and who is not an immigrant on stolen land. So if there's if we burn down the state, ICE is part of the state, so we would still solve for the impacts of your plan.
All right. So my next question would be, how does the affirmative form of, or I mean, how does the if the alternative is like burning down the state, why does the permutation not work? Or why is the permutation not preferable?
So the permutation doesn't work from arguments in her speech. We spoke about like that, but just to start her off, one big reason why you can't, the plan necessitates the settler state to be in a position of the settler state to exist.
Okay, so like, how does the plan necessitate the government if we're demanding from the government? Like, how is that? What's the difference? Or how is that not? Why is there no difference? That's my question. How?
We're saying that there is a difference.
Okay, yeah. What's the difference?
The difference is that you rely on the state to grant you reforms. You're engaging with the settler state and thus legitimizing it, while the alternative is completely rejecting engaging with the state and completely rejecting the settler state.
All right.
I'm glitching out like crazy right now, so I don't let me know if you can hear me.
Yeah, you're totally clear.
Yeah, you're clear. Sophia, may I make a suggestion that you restart your system really quick because you're very laggy right now?
Oh, okay, yeah, I got a thing. So should I just leave and come back?
Yeah, let's see if that fixes it.
Okay.
I'm gonna put this on so that you get it. Wow, that was a struggle. I'm sending it now. Sorry about that.
You're good.
Oh my god, I think my Wi-Fi is broken completely. I'm so sorry.
I see the fan and I think of pen flipping. I want to flip a pen so bad.
Oh, my fan?
Yeah. So the circular motion is just pen flipping time.
I don't know how to flip a pen.
Me neither.
I don't think I'm physically capable.
I've learned how. I physically have to refrain from doing it at tournaments, and yeah, it's hard.
I can't do it repeatedly. Like I'll get one in at a time, but I gotta like stop and reset each time. It's not the same.
Okay. Sorry, this is still.
All right. Here she comes.
I'm so sorry. It's just not responding. Oh, okay, it's responding. No.
Who in the chat knows a good pen trick?
Who are these people?
Which people? I'm good.
So, Alon Shafrir, Vicky Fritz. I don't know who these people are. I meant it's like a pro appearing on my screen.
I connected. I don't know if I'm still like very laggy right now or.
No, you're solid.
Can you talk for like 20 seconds straight? Like, do you have pets? What's your favorite pet?
I do have pets. So I have 2 parakeets and I have 2 dogs. I think my favorite dog is probably the puppy that we just got. Because he's really cute and his name's Percy, like Percy Jackson, and it makes my middle school self very happy because I was obsessed with that series.
Yeah, you're good now. Thank you for the pet stuff.
Of course, anytime.
Awesome. So we already did cross-X, right? Now it's the 1 in R?
I didn't know someone's gonna like anything.
You need a moment. You're fine.
I am so sorry. It's not loading.
Yeah, no worries. Take your time. So
Can I just copy and paste it into the email because it's literally not loading?
Wait, Rachel, do you want me to
Yeah, can you send it? Because I literally can't send it.
Okay, you shared it with me, right?
It's the same doc.
cool. So I just muted the stream. Y'all could still talk to each other here right now. But Oh, sorry, we're muted right now, so let me unmute it, and then you could give your overview or your roadmap.
And then case.
All right, cool. And we're back.
Oh, you could hear me? Sorry.
Now we can hear you. Cool.
Oh, sorry.
And we're back. We just finished up the cross-X. Hey. Shout out to all the folks vibing in the chat, talking about their cats and dogs. Hey. Great. So now we've got the 1NR. Are you ready?
I am.
Cool. You could start with your roadmap, and we can jump right into it.
All right, the roadmap is going to be perm on the K and then on to case. All right, starting off, no perm. Question their starting points. The K comes as a sequencing question. Our alternative is net better because we analyze the broader context of the colonial state and how settler logic undergirds the entire border immigration apparatus. Next, reject the permutation as a reification of settler colonialism. The AF uses settler colonialist logics to take the work of the negative and make it their own in the same way that settlers steal indigenous land and attempt to indigenize themselves or naturalize Black, Brown, and indigenous bodies into civilized society. Skip that part. I don't know why that wasn't deleted. I apologize. And then moving on to the DAs to the perm. The language of the perm, specifically the line that SETCOL has affected institution, is settler equivocation. It denies the reality that settler colonialism is an ongoing event and exists at the very heart of our institutions, and that using the institutions to claim and solve moral issues is a move of settler innocence. The language also allows the AF to justify SETCOL for the sake of enacting policy. Next, the perm portrays the state as benevolent. This is harmful because it erases the ongoing genocide and disposition of indigenous people at the hands of the state. Every AF argument for the perm links back to the K because they are all justifications for the policymaking at the expense of the ongoing violence against indigenous people. Also, the perm also allows the state to co-opt the negs rhetoric without ever actually decolonizing it. It will continue to defer the alt because the state, it will never willingly destroy itself. The AF condones genocide as the state continues improving conditions with things like the 1AC, and indigenous people will continue to be killed. If the 1AC truly wanted to decolonize, they wouldn't have written their AF through the lens of the settler futurity. They should have centered indigenous resistance on scholarship. The perm tracks on the alt as an afterthought, minimizing our calls for radical change. Literally, they can claim that they are not settler futurity, but the fact of the matter is if you're taking a policy-making stance, then you have agreed to act on settler futurity. All dispatch to the perm are links to the AF. Moving on to their perm do both argument, they claim that they acknowledge whose land we live on, but again, extend Tecker 13, you must take a decolonized stance, not acknowledge the shit that the institution does, and then use that same exact institution to address the shit that doesn't work. They're literally saying, they also say that the AF takes into account the use of the takes into account colonization and then uses the law to solve, same as the neg, but that's blatantly false. We don't use the law to solve. We say we should actually burn down the state. We say reject the state in its entirety and decolonize the land and give it back to indigenous people. And then perm, on their perm, we are the alternative argument. No, you're not. You're not. You're using the settler colonialized state, and using that state is exactly what we don't want to do. So claiming that you are the alternative is incorrect because you are legitimately endorsing the state by using the state to do moral thing or moral goods. That is exactly what the state wants in order to look better and do worse things in the future. Moving on. They take it super out of context. The purple highlighting includes her description of what the political strategy of rupture is. And it's a refusal to play towards sympathy with colonizers. So basically their whole AF which is like, oh, we got to save the poor innocent immigrants in opposition to your K, which is actually employing a politics of rupture by saying, nah, burn the whole system down. Screw trying to appear sympathetic and pitiable. The AF is doing exactly what this card says not to do. They don't rupture the settler colonial order. They codify it. Bander 12. Verges states the following in retaliation to the trial. The problem wasn't to play for sympathy as left-wing lawyers advise us to do so, but from the murder who judged us, but to taunt them, to provoke incidents that would reach people in Paris, London, Brussels, and Cairo. The refusal to play for sympathy from those empowered to uphold the law. From power to uphold the law. What? In a colonial legal order, hints at the much more profound refusal lies at the basis of the strategy of the rupture, which we see unfold throughout the film. And refusing to accept the characterization of Jadma acts as criminal acts, Verges challenges the very legal categories that were used to criminalize, condemn, and punish anti-colonial resistance. The refusal to make the defendant's actions cognizable to and intelligible within the colonial legal framework breaks the capacity of the judges to adjudicate in at least two senses. First, their moral authority is radically undermined by an outright rejection of the legal terms of reference categories which they are appointed to uphold. Basically, their card is taken completely out of context and actually supports our argument. Moving on to case. Extend Sure 18. Simply abolishing ICE will not change broader immigration laws. Undocumented people will still be undocumented and subject to abuses. Deportations and abuse will still happen either through CBP or ICE 2.0. The same old xenophobia will exist post-plan. Also, no solvency. The USFG will immediately replace ICE with a functionally identical agency. Also, they say that the challenges how people are put there in the first place. That's CBP in the colonial state, which is what the AF is doing nothing against CBP in the colonial state. Those are the ones actually dictating who deserves to stay in the country, who deserves to be reported, and who deserves to be in detention centers. And the AF can't fiat that the government won't replace the the same harms will continue. The government will just be smarter about terrorizing immigrants. Us talking about this and pointing it out is not a link to the K. We're simply engaging with their framework on the case debate. So really, they just proved how they linked. We are not settler futurity in action. They are the ones who walked into this debate with the intention of reforming the settler state. CDP as a link proves that reform can't solve settler state because of the same reproduction of those same actions. That's all. Thank you.
Great. Right on time. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the block. You been ready? Do you need prep? You're muted. All right,
Yeah.
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 Yes, prep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So head to your breakout room if you want, or you do here, whichever works. All right, but yeah, let's talk about that block.
Yeah, as soon as Rachel and Sophie leave. Sorry. Just go to your breakout room. Yeah, because we're gonna be talking about your speech.
I don't have a breakout room invitation.
Oh, yeah, I need to reassign you. Okay. Let's see, where do I do that? There you go. You should have it now.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, cool.
So this was interesting. I think the keyword here is interesting. So I think that there's a lot of generalizations within the block that make it very hard for me to want to vote neg with just the block. I think a lot of this will now have to depend on the 2NR and what the 1AR does for me. I have one piece of historical example within like the set call debate to really choose from. I don't have any instances of actions like ICE where an institution was destroyed or changed and it has created a new agency like before that would affirm the settler project, which I think would be the best way for me to allow a link to be used in my RFT. As right now, I'm banking that the 1AR mishandles the futurity debate very much. But if they can prove that they are a form of anti-futurity by using this AF as a first step to create a spillover to itself destroy the state and use anti-logic to do so, it could get very interesting. The case debate, I think, is where a lot of this can be done for the AF just to win, because the AF does have an extinction impact. And on the block specifically, they've allowed a we meet on the framework debate. If the AF concedes the we meet and goes for the extinction scenario, I think it's game over, just game over. And they would have to do new impact calculus in the 2NR, and no judge is going to vote for that.
Yeah, let's see if they catch that. I agree on the other parts. I'm kind of buying the examples that they're given, that abolishing ICE might end up getting reformed into like an ICE 2.0, like, or I think they listed a couple other departments like HHS and like Homeland Security sort of taking that over. I think they could spend more time on that to sort of talk about this link on futurity and things. But I think they've got the pieces there if they spin it the right way going into the 2NR.
Right. Like, I like the fact that they spent a lot of time on the permutation debate, because I think they need to, because this AF basically is a permutation debate. But I think
so much of the AF was leaning in on that perm and just like, we are the K, and I think they spent the right amount of time sort of like making the distinction between what the alt is and what the AF does.
Right. Are they back? I heard a ping ping.
Oh, that was
No. Gotcha. Yeah, I agree with you on that. So for people who are watching, when you're doing the link articulation and the alt articulation within the debate, you need to connect it to a lot of historical instances that are very easy for the judge to look at and to create the story within the critique, right? And how the AF then affirms a settler project. Some judges require more example than others. I can buy some of it. I have a higher threshold than JFlow, which is just a difference in the judging thing. And only getting judged by a judge multiple times or having like different judges will really tell you how much of the time should be spent. And the feedback they'll give you on the RFD will sort of like change how you debate this critique.
Yeah, I definitely have a lower threshold there. I'm more flexible and gonna let, if they make the spin in the 2NR, definitely more likely to do that. But I totally agree. It definitely depends on the judge and sort of figuring out what that is. Cool. So let me check in on them. Okay, so I'm not going to go into the breakout room just because that's what broke the stream last time. But I just sent them a text. Hey. Oh, Curtis, I was gonna type this out, but since we've got a second, we were gonna have a tournament, and we were in the strategizing process for getting a tournament hosted down at Hearts, but then Rona happened, so we weren't able to host one there in person. But hopefully in the future, we'd love to have a tournament down there. But for the time being, it's super awesome that we get to have this online. For those of you that tuned in the middle, we've got 4 debaters, all alumni, all former debate partners from high school. On the affirmative, we've got Cuban and Jonathan from Stern Mass in LA. And on the negative, we have Sophia and Rachel from Crystal Ray in San Jose from SVUDL. So as all of you know, as people that are here at the West Coast Champs Debate Institute, this has been a collaborative effort between 3 leagues, LA, Silicon Valley, and the Bay Area. So even though Rona has taken away our in-person events, it's brought us things like this that I couldn't have imagined us doing anywhere but online. So thank you all for tuning in. And it looks like Cuban, are you ready for the 1AR? All right. Here we go.
Okay.
Started on your word.
Overview?
I do have a question. If you decide to spread, we do ask that you send the analytics, because just internet issues and also audio issues.
Most of it would just be like line by line.
Will
like,
you be spreading the line by line?
That's like writing out a 5-minute speech, which can't.
Like an outline. Like.
Oh, can I just tell you where I'll be at? Then
that's
just
cool.
Like
as long as you give you kind of signposts and yeah, if you can respect, if we say like clear or slow, then it's fine.
Here is like the general jargon I'll be talking about. I'll just post it.
Let's take a second to
I have some.
Cool. All right, stream's muted. All right, we've got that part put down, and remind me if this is true. Joseph Parkman currently has his flow posted in the Discord. Yep.
That is correct.
So if you're a younger debater and you want to follow along, or if you tuned in late and want to see where the debate has been before and want to catch up, go ahead and check in on the Discord where you could follow along with the flow. Okay, cool. 5 minutes on the clock.
Is anyone not ready?
What's the order?
Case framework, and then there'll be like some top level stuff. Then the permutation answers, links. Yeah.
Just signpost really, really well.
Gotcha. Yes. I'll just make sure to be very explicit where I'm at. And it will fall into, it's not in order like the block, but there's, yeah, sure. Okay. Okay, is anyone not ready? Cool. ICE is a contemporary visualization of settler colonialism which forwards a biopolitical control over the land and body that dictates who belongs to this land and who doesn't. This logic is foundational towards structural antagonisms between settler society and indigeneity, as it is rooted within the fixation towards constant elimination of those who challenge the ownership of this land. Onto the case proper. The first argument is a literal example of settler futurity in which that they take into consideration of what the state will do in the future, what would happen post-fiat, what happened with Trump administration. This is problematic because it never leads to any policy creation or abolition within the state. That only reinstates what they describe, but the 1AC doesn't defend the state or reinstate of what defend the state or use the logic within the state, but rather we use the state against this stuff in order to deconstruct it from within. That only allows for spillover for broader deconstruction movement. We have a contemporary example, for example, like you said, like Bernie Sanders, who is a political leader who has led movements and engagement between millions of people outside of the debate space, that has engaged within this community to create more educational discourses and to challenge the ways that in which the government stays in control in order to move away from the current settler colonial regimen. Onto the framework. They consider they consider our interpretation in which that we get to weigh the half against the critique, which means that we get to weigh the deaths of the millions and stated by white supremacy over the deaths of indigenous people, in which that we fundamentally access the root cause argument, in which that the white supremacy is the reason why indigeneity was kicked out of their land. In addition to that, why anti-blackness occurs inside of the first place, in which that we are able to access all of their impacts argument. If anything, we have a defense of our epistemology, in which that the discussion of abolish ICE and others is very core to the ethics of eliminating biopolitical control, which is found rooted within the indigenous regimen today. We'll do the top level analysis here. A lot of the analysis talks is relying upon us using the state of the United States federal government, which is a fundamental link of omission. They have to prove why using the state or that the policy of abolishing ICE in of itself leads to the recreation of settler colonialism, which is not the case, in which that we'd rather prove that we're compatible with the alternative, since we are a form of abolition movement. Don't get it twisted. We are not the same as reformism. We are abolitionism, which was very clearly stated inside of the 1AC crosses. We are able to turn the entirety of the critique because we are the same thing as the alternative. The alternative in the text specifically says there's no one measure and way that we can achieve forms of abolition, but rather there can be multiple plethora of ways in which that we can engage the institution or otherwise. If anything, we have an arguable defense of the institution, but rather having educational discussions outside within the spaces like debate, we are able to garnish movements, and having audiences like this in the LAMDL YouTube, we're able to kind of create the movement and education in order to move away from the state and eventually overthrow the state, which would be on the permutation right now. Answering all of the arguments, they just tie us to the settler state, don't tie us to the settler state. We do not defend them or reinstate them. We have a policy which is supported by indigenous authors, i.e. your own author also agrees with us, and plenty of our authors that we have read above also agrees that there must be an anti-decolonization and move away from the state of permutation to both solves all of your offense and dissents in which that we are able to eventually create a larger abolitionist movement, a way that eventually destroys the state. There's no reason why we shouldn't start from an initial abolition of the ICE, in which that we can eventually lead to a larger spillover, in which that was our last piece of evidence that we read. Inside of the 2AC, in which that, for example, like Bernie Sanders, in which that we're able to create broader spillovers in order to create further abolition. They have no inherent examples about why abolition leads to reinstate of the state, but rather they just say that the United States federal government is just messed up. And we agree with you, in which that the permutation also accesses all of the educational states about why it is bad. They make a claim about why policy making is bad, but rather we are using the state against this stuff. We don't reinforce this education, but rather we should just move away from it, which solves all of their offensive firsts. We'll go line by line specifically to the links. Basically, we accept immigrants as a form of multiculturalism, but this is not us, because we don't defend a futurity in which that immigrants stay here, but rather that the biopolitical control exerted by ICE is problematic in first place. ICE has also contained a lot of indigenous people, and in addition to that, we have an arguable defense of our policy, like more on the top, like we have a defense of our policymaking, which that the court case we presented in the 2AC is an example in which that indigenous people can get back their land and retain their own sovereignty over the land, which means that we're institutionally still able to solve. They say that homogenous it reaffirms white supremacy, but rather we move away from white supremacy logic in which that we destroy ICE, which was foundational towards the expansion of settler colonialism because it kind of reinstates who belongs to it and who is not. They say freedom. We don't guarantee like the freedom and security of indigenous people, but rather we just destroy the entire state as a whole. Through the permutation to both means that we are able to solve for everything. If anything, to talk about policy making, it doesn't make sense because we already proved that we are different from a reformism or any of their links in which I would just completely destroy the state. And yeah.
How much prep time do we have left? 3:30? Okay, cool.
Bye-bye. Bye, Cuban. Go to your room. JFlow, if you're talking, I can't hear you.
Yep, I muted my mic.
That happens.
Cool. All right. So let's see. Got to look back at my notes a little bit to see how I'm feeling about that one. I think Cuban spends a lot of time sort of saying that he's distinguished himself on the perm, but I'm not too sure if it's been finalized on that front. I think there's still a risk of a link here, but I've got a lower threshold on that than you do. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling he undercovered the case debate. I think he needed to go harder on the solvency question of the debate, especially with the concession on the top portions of the case debate that the neg didn't extend in the 1NR. And yeah, I don't know how I view the K debate because it's very repetitious. And in this regard, it was very all over the place.
Yeah. I've kind of gotten lost in like how the app functions at this point, but so much of the link just depends on that.
Right, like will the AF destroy the state itself? I don't know because I don't know. Will the AF be a newer form of another institution that would create a more of a settler project? Again, I don't know. This one will actually depend on the 2NR and in the 2AR for me, but I'm slightly leaning neither. Like this is one of those, both teams had the opportunity to get my ballot and both teams decided not to grab my ballot in their speeches, right? There is a conceded extinction scenario in the 1AC that if I were a little bit more interventionist would have just probably meant an auto F win, but I need them to talk about it. And they didn't talk about it in the 1AR. They have the weighings of millions of people killed, but the negs impacts are the same thing. Right.
Yeah, so much of the debate and the impact level has just sort of disappeared. And like, we're not really seeing too much of that, but I'm gonna be a little bit more of an optimist in the debate. And I feel like both teams will want to come back strong and it'll require some spin, and it was missing from earlier in the debate, but maybe they get a boost in those speakers for this 2NR 2AR. We'll see.
Right. I think part of the problem as to why it's so hard for me is because the creation of the theory of power debate on the block was very, very bare because they went straight into the link debate. And so I don't know what the exact story of the K is. And I'm trying to recreate it in my mind by my own self and my flow. And it's making the connections between the AF and the neg a little bit difficult.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit blurry here, especially on that level, because on some extent, I do believe that the AF is like in the direction of the K, and also at the same point, like I don't know when it becomes this question of like the futurity aspect. I don't think that's really being resolved because just sort of like with what you opened with, it's going both ways. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think if it stays this way, it's going to be a 55%, 45% like flip for most judges, depending on how they view the threshold on the permutation and the link debate. But we'll see how this goes.
close one, though. Let me check in on our debaters. They should be coming back in just a second. I haven't looked at the chat in just a second, but shout out to Michaela. Thanks for all your input and your ideas on this. I look forward to sort of hearing who you think wins this debate at the end.
Hey, Sophia's completely glitching out, so she's struggling to get back.
No worries.
Yeah, worst comes to worst, have her restart her PC.
Yeah, I'll text her that.
Yeah, because that just resets everything. I think right now the RAM is like burning.
Of course, my phone's burning. We've
been going for a while, and everyone's tech is on fire. But
it's only been about an hour, actually, like an hour and 15 minutes.
That's pretty long for streaming on your phone.
That's true. You said, of course, comes to worst, restart your book, your thing, PC. Tours where you start. What? Yippee-ki, yay, motherfuckers. Okay, she said okay. I don't know what that means. I don't speak texting.
No worries. We could hang tight. To be expected. But
yeah, just give it a few minutes.
Yeah. Speaking on tech issues and things, it's exciting to see what we're doing with the online debate. I wonder what the season's going to look like for most folks.
I'm going to try not to be frustrated, but I think a lot of people will become frustrated with the tech issues because we've resolved some of it, but there are still tech issues going on now.
I used to get annoyed as a judge when like there would be tech issues in the round, but I've just sort of accepted them as an inevitability, and just with time it's gotten better. I remember when like things were first transitioning and it would be like half paper, half like laptops, and it's funny, like as people start getting these new laptops with like USB-C, like flash drives are not like ubiquitous anymore. Like people don't have universal flash drives anymore. Like everyone doesn't have a USB-A port, so now it's like, oh, I've got a flash drive, but it's not compatible with your computer. It's like, what's the universal mean if we can't all use it? But
right. No, I've encountered that in some rounds where it's like, well, I have a flash drive to flash because our internet is bad, and they're like, no, and I'm like, well, I hope you have a paper copy or you're ready to share your screen with them.
Yeah, it's weird. Like when paperless first came around, flash drive was like the standard. But now
wait, Sophia says she can't restart without updating her PC. She's gonna try and rejoin it.
Okay.
She says she's gonna try and see if she can be heard. Speak your voice, Sophia. It's your voice. Your voice matters.
Is she still in the room?
I don't know. She like, I don't know, went somewhere. Rest in peace, Sophia.
She isn't.
Yeah, I don't see her.
Yeah. If you're on the main hall chat or the main hall channel and you're looking at the flow, if there are any portions of the flow y'all are confused about, don't be afraid to like ask questions in the general chat under the auditorium, so that I can answer some of those things either during the stream or after the stream with you all. Because I think that learning how to flow these sorts of like critique rounds or just rounds in general are very important, right? Because you have to make order of this chaos, and being able to do so as debaters is important, because if you can make order out of it, you can make order out of it for the judges too.
Yeah, so many rounds when things are in the air. It's really the team that does the most work for me that usually ends up ahead. And also, I know some of y'all might be novice or JV debaters. If there's any terms that are coming up, just let us know what some of those are in the chat, and we could try to define some of them, right? So like settler futurity and all these bigger terms, right? Maybe we take a second. Oh, looks like Sophia's back.
Okay.
Sophia, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Blink twice.
This is literally like, oh my god. Okay.
Hey,
I'm not gonna.
we were having a good conversation.
I'm good.
Yeah,
Y'all can hear me. Okay, good.
were you cutting out there? Or no?
What was that?
I think you're good.
Okay, cool. I can't hear. Okay, so the order is gonna be okay. Yeah. Hold on. Give me a sec to scroll down. I had to close all my documents. Okay. Okay. I just set my time. If at any point I like am disconnecting, Rachel, just like call me, okay? So I can stop. Yeah. Hold on. All right. Is anybody not ready? Cool. So time starts now. The app wants to pretend that abolishing ICE is a net good action. They'll admit it's not perfect and it doesn't end all the problems with the criminal justice system or immigration policy, but you need to reject this rhetoric. We've won that the US is a settler state whose continued existence necessitates the massacre and erasure of indigenous people in the past and in the present. The 1AC is inherently unethical because instead of seeing the structure and rejecting it, it decides to engage with it. This engagement makes the settler state look like a good and benevolent figure, and thus justifies the genocide necessary to maintain that state. When evaluating this round, Judge, you need to vote for the team that actively calls for decolonization and rejects the settler state. You can extend Tuck 13 here because even if the AF claims that they understand the past violence against indigenous populations, this still does not change the fact that they are endorsing the legitimacy of the settler state and its continued violence in the present day and eternal violence in the future against indigenous bodies. We did not consider framework here. We said that we still outweigh them because the impacts of their plan are not white supremacy and millions dying in the future. It's the undocumented people being impacted by ICE today and immigration reform. The AF is so willing to talk about future violence that may happen if we don't pass the plan, but not once have they really engaged with the fact that there is current settler violence happening right now that they are endorsing. They didn't answer our counter-interpretation. Send that here. You need to vote for the team that best deconstructs settler colonialism within the round and that has the best epistemology that we get the best learning from and best education. We do not get the best education by talking about policymaking and pretending to be state actors for a settler state. Instead, we get the best education for out of round for actually influencing real decolonization in the real world and actually materially impacting the lives of the millions of the hundreds of thousands of indigenous people that exist in this country today by learning about settler colonialism and deconstructing it and advocating for the alls. On the perm argument, our alternative must come first. The perm cannot exist. You cannot both improve the settler state and reject the settler state. It doesn't make any sense. They are not the alt. You should reject this logic. They can claim that it leads to the same end goal, but it doesn't. It only reinforces the already existing settler colonialist moral high ground they claim with every new liberal reform that comes about. Extend Tuck 13 here. You have to start with a decolonized stance, not with the colonizers themselves. They will never lead to complete abolition of the state or decolonization. This argument is basically a deferral. This country has been deferring indigenous people for years. They are recreating settler colonialism within this round, and you can't let this slide by saying, eventually it will lead to abolition. When will it lead to abolition? What is the evidence that it will lead to abolition? And the truth is they have none. Moving on to the links. Remember, judges, all dissads to the perm are links to the case. So what I said above is more links, but the perm portrays the state as benevolent. This justifies the state-sanctioned violence, especially when the AF themselves know that they can't address any of the impacts or harms they outline in their 1AC. Claiming that abolishing ICE is a moral obligation of the state portrays the state as the one that has morals, one that strives for equality, one that is often portrayed as the land of the free. That land now serves as the home for settlers in the same land with which more bodies are buried to obscure the truth, natives who have been dispossessed and should regain sovereignty. And on the multiculturalism link, the app does not adequately answer this. They just said that ICE is a settler colonialist structure. They didn't answer our critique here, really. The goal of the app, again, is to create a country more accepting of immigrants. This links back to the K because it allows the state to pretend it is being ethical while ignoring that for the fact that for liberal multiculturalism to exist, it must exist on stolen land. And in the 1AR, they literally linked multiple times. Like, for example, they said recreating settler colonialism multiple times. Y'all, it already exists, and y'all are already engaging with it, and y'all are already endorsing it and justifying it. You can extend the alt, you can extend the Catherine Kelly Abraham card. We need to burn down the state to decolonize the state. It will never decolonize itself. They do not access our alt by engaging the state. They are not abolition in the grand scheme of things. They bring up Oklahoma. Just that court decision is not proof that the settler state will reform itself. It is literally the settler state saying, well, earlier colonizers said this land is yours, so it's yours. Actual decolonization is giving all land back to the natives. Ultimately, if we win that the settler state can only exist as a result of ongoing dispossession and genocide, which we do, then it is unethical for you to endorse the act. Voting out for one reform comes at the expense of portraying the state as benevolent and good and multicultural, incorporating new immigrants as settlers, and continuing the genocide that is killing indigenous people in this country. And that's all I have. Vote for the alts.
Wow. Cool. Debaters could head back to their prep rooms, and it'll be time for 2AR in just a moment.
I don't have a, oh, there it goes. Thank you.
I think, Sophia, you can stay. The more, oh God. The next done, oh no. Yeah.
I just opened it up, no problem. That's fine. Okay.
It's okay. Yeah, we're good.
All right. So, do you think that addressed some of the concerns you had going into that 2NR?
No.
Okay.
It made it a little bit more difficult for me to evaluate the round now because the concession of the case debate was not a thing that should have occurred. Because now the case spillover argument is true. And it's going to depend on how the links deal with the spillover of abolition per the 1AC's arguments within my flow. And I think that NEG went for too many links instead of collapsing to two links that they can really, really explain. Right, the best explained link in this debate is the futurity argument. I would have liked for them to go for the, where is it? The moral obligation thing, because that was in the 1AC. On the bottom part of the 1AC, they were saying you have a moral obligation to get rid of the ICE detention centers. And I think that card just then becomes true as per the 1AC link evidence that touted why moral obligations within the liberal society is a bad thing.
Yeah, I think that articulation coming out of 2NR was a really strong link. And sitting on that one would have been helpful for me as well. But I think that was a good link, and it could have been part of the debate earlier. But yeah, and I don't think it's just happening in the 1AC. I think even thinking back to the cross-ex of the 2AC and Jonathan's articulation about like we're making demands on the state for the state to take action, and we have to make it do it. That a lot of the articulation coming out of some of the AF
right
could have been pointed to a bit closer. Like had more time been spent there, that link work would have been done because they're making the right link. I think I agree with you that sitting more there and sort of explicitly pointing to those instances would help. But
Right.
yeah. Let's see. What else? There was something else. Yeah. No. Sophia's definitely a great speaker, and she was able to sort of articulate those points. And at least for me, she makes a very clear stance on what how the K functions and what they're doing there. Whereas with the app, I'm still a little bit confused about the solvency mechanisms. But let's see if the TUAR collapses some of those things.
Right. Wait, this is the wrong one. Just an FYI for everyone who's watching, please don't use the term all the dissets to the permutation are links to the app. I am not a fan of that because I don't know what that, I mean, I know what it means, but you need to explain to me what the context is in that regard. Like, why does it function as a link, right? Don't just make the claim. I need a warrant attached to the claim to make it a true argument in a debate round. Like, it's a little blip that costs them 5 seconds in the round, but sometimes those 5 seconds can cost you a round because you don't go to another portion of the debate. But I really like the negs debate so far.
Where they at? Come on back.
Of course, the app is stealing prep. What's new?
Awesome. All right. Final speech, 2AR. Where's it gonna go? Let's find out. Jonathan, are you ready?
All right, I'm good.
All right. Start the time.
Hold up.
Hold up. Let me, like, the roadmap, it's going to be the case, framework, then the K.
Did you get it?
Yeah. Did everyone else get the roadmap? Okay. Let me fix my screen real quick because it's really bad. All right, I'm good. So, case overview. ICE is the government's lapdog to enforce continual colonial logics who belongs on this land and who doesn't. The 1AC problematizes this as securitization of the state and maintains white supremacy through racial profiling and human rights abuse. The affirmative believes that reform is not enough, and only through abolition does it hold the state accountable for continual attempts of humanizing detention centers and deportation. The affirmative believes that abolishing ICE is a form of negative action that we are able to demand the state to dismantle itself. This is one of the first ways we could lead to a form of a revolution. The next onto case proper, they drop the case in the 2NR, meaning that we solve for our impacts, which is extinction. This is really huge because we see how many children are in the ICE custodies and they are dying. We've mentioned in the 1AC how there's over 100 million people dying under ICE custody, and these includes indigenous people. There's violence happening in indigenous people, and that is real. This is material. This is why we need material action of the 1AC. It's a form of first steps that we need to take to dismantle the system. Onto the framework. prefer our framework. They drop this in the 2NR. First is fairness. Their framework is self-serving and they do not lead to a fair debate. Debate is a game and we need a fairness. Therefore, we are allowed to vote we are allowed to weigh our aff against the critique, and we are weighing our aff. So the affirmative. Vote affirmative on case that weighs. The affirmative has a big impact, which is extinction, and we are able to solve for that by abolishing ICE. It's a form of physical material action that needs to be taken place in order to solve for the structural violence and extinction that happens because of white supremacy and because of the settler colonial state using ICE agencies as a form of extending the settler colonial power. Onto Cape Perms. Fundamentally, abolition is the only way to resolve. Both the affirmative and the negative agrees that reformism maintains a settler futurity. However, acts of abolition and engagement within the state are not mutually exclusive. In that way, do we reaffirm the state power justification within staying in this land. Instead, the 1AC forwards the same values of alternative and destroys the state. The alternative card reaffirms abolition as a way to solve for the settler colonialism. The alternative card states how there's not only one way of abolition, means that we get access to the permutation. Permutation do both, resolves everything in this debate, eliminating the social and physical oppression by the state through forms of ICE and Homeland Security that monitors its citizens, creates the condition necessary to allow for revoking to so-called burn down the state. Don't buy their line of analytics that state can never be abolished itself. No evidence to back it up. Permutation shields all links because the nexus of all discussions are rooted within decolonization, the destruction of white supremacy. There will be no compromise outside of abolition of ICE. The 2AC refusal to address concerns surrounding the futurity of agency proves their dropping of the case in the 2NR shows how there will not be like discussing ideas of what will replace ICE is bad, because we need to talk about how the abolition ICE being abolished is the only option, and that's the only option the affirmative will take a stance on. This is why you must vote affirmative to abolish ICE. All the links they provide are links to the state and how we using the state as a form of reformism is bad. But the affirmative is not reformism, because the affirmative calls for abolition of of ICE and Homeland Security. The affirmative does not use the state as a form of creating better life or create a better system, but it's a form of destroying the system. We're not trying to make ICE better. We're not trying to make ICE more homing or more nice for immigrants, but we're trying to remove ICE as a whole. The entirety of the 2NR does not describe how their abolition takes place. The 1AC and the entirety of the affirmative speeches does. Abolition of ICE is a form of It's a domino effect that will lead to other forms of abolition. We must destroy this system of this tool of the government first, and we need to do it now. They talk about burning down the world, but like the affirmative is the only team that provides like matches, which is abolishing ICE.
Good job.
Nice job, y'all.
Good debate. There's a huge lag on this YouTube thing. I gotta watch it.
I think it's like 15 seconds.
It's like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, dang.
Yeah, I think it's like got a little bit of time on it, but wow, nice job. Cool.
Woo.
So
Thank you guys.
I don't know if we wanted to make a decision or not, or if we just wanted to talk generally. I usually don't on demos.
I want to talk about the 2AR and what could have been done and what was good about the 2AR. But other than that, I generally also do never, ever give an RFD through any sort of demo or practice debate, because
RFDs help though.
then you're going to need to give me like 10 minutes. We don't have 10 minutes. Because I have to make up the thoughts on the fly, right? Instead of writing it down and really like fleshing it out. I think I can do one. It's not going to be.
First and then go into that part.
So I like leveraging the case debate in the AR. This is why I did not like the 2NR conceding the case, because now I can probably weigh extinction, and that's going to do some weird things to my decision calculus in this round. Is whether or not I do. I'm leaning I probably do. It's like about a 70-30. It depends really on what this morale or this what is this? Where is this on my flow? The link that was conceded by the AF, which is the moral obligation link, is now 100% true. I have to risk the risk of this link being true versus an extinction scenario, and I don't know how to feel about that. I feel morally wrong about trying to weigh extinctions, but it's also a conceded point, right? Part of this will also deal with which framework arguments I end up voting for. Do I vote for the framing arguments of the AF or the neg? Because in this particular debate, it was like two ships passing on in the night on the framing issue, where the AF only talked about the framing of the AF, and the neg only talked about the framing of the neg in relation to the 1AR and in the 2NR, which is problematic for me. And as a more of a policy-oriented judge, I lean towards being allowed to weigh the AF. But I think if the neg had pointed out that if the AF did not link, or if the AF did link to any part of the set call debate, I should probably not ever weigh the AF. And if they had made it implicit on the top portion of the debate in the overview, I would probably never even look at the AF in the first place, even if you do drop it, because there are conceded links coming out of this 2AR. Some of the things that I liked about Jonathan's speech is affirming the spillover and what abolition looks like, and as being, I particularly like the last part about being the match that starts the fire. Right, that's a very good imagery within my mind. Whether or not it'll play a role in a decision is, I don't know yet. Right, the parts that I do not like is just the concessions of the links that are just really, really good versus the AF. And this is the one that we talked about in the previous speech, which is the multicultural. Not the multicultural, but the moral obligation link that Jonathan triggered in the process of the 2AC, as well as the 1AC's cards on the bottom of the 1AC. And there was something else that I put a WUT2. Oh, when they were applying case arguments in the middle of the K, that should have been on the top level of the K, i.e. the sort of double turn argument that was conceded by the neg. I could have probably voted for it. I'm going to be 100% honest, but I'm not going to vote for it in the middle of the critique. It should be on the top of the AF flow as to why the AF or why the neg double turns themselves, because they conceded in the 2NR, and the 1AR does extend it. So I'm a little confused there as to why they made that decision in this debate.
Awesome. I've got less to say on 2AR specifically, but I wanted to sort of address some of the comments on our stream. So shout out to our novices tuning in for the advanced debate. I see Rodrigo. Okay? I see all you other folks. Shout out to my novice labbies, all y'all that are in here. Right? So Rodrigo asks, what is a perm and what is a K? So you haven't gotten into any of this yet because you're just starting debate, but a permutation is when you do both things, right? So the affirmative wanted to abolish ICE, right, to sort of enact this policy and to have the government dismantle ICE, right? Whereas the negative believes that the federal government and everything that it does is inherently colonial, right? That it's built on land that was stolen, and any action that it takes will not be moral. So the only moral thing that you could do in the face of an immoral state is to burn it down. So they both agree that there's an issue with immigration, but it's a question of where do we start? The affirmative believes that through the permutation, or through doing both of these things, that the affirmative is, as they say in the 2AR, the match that lights the fire of the burning it down that is the alternative, right? Or in other words, to combine the policy of dismantling ICE with the theory and the sort of paradigm of abolition of the state, right? To burn everything down. yeah, I hope that answers that question.
Woo, Rodrigo! Am I on mute? I am not on mute.
No, you're
Go
not.
to nice question.
Yeah. Thanks for the questions, Rodrigo. And don't say sorry. We want to encourage it. We're all here to learn. Awesome. Yeah. Michaela liked y'all's analogies and your articulations, and she was very impressed with some of your stuff. So shout out to all the debaters. Let's see. Let's see. I think that's all I've got. In terms of like specific RFDs, we could do that off stream. But thank you all for tuning in. This is recorded, and you can watch it from the beginning if you want to. But aside from that, thank you to our participants. Shout out to Rachel. Shout out to Sophia. Shout out to Cuban. Shout out to John. Shout out to Jill.
Shout out to my mom.
Shout out to your mom.
Hi, Mom.
Y'all have any thank yous?
Oh, thank you, Saya.
Thank you, Saya. Thank you,
Saya.
Saya. I don't know if we should say. Should we say it, Rachel?
Yeah. Thank
I
you,
guess it's
Saya.
over. That's the first time we run a set call, okay? So she really helped us like understanding it and like how to run it.
Like
yeah,
literally right before
that
this
was-
debate, we were in her like workshop for the K. We were like, help.
Oh yeah, it was
Like the first time.
it was okay, good. I'm glad.
In front of me multiple times, and y'all sounded.
On glue.
This is-
I'm glad. I'm happy. So thank you, Saya. Thank you to Lucia as well for having
And Dr.
us for
Burns.
this and supporting us, and Dr. Burns as well.
And, yeah,
everyone
Lucia
at
with her
SVUDL, honestly.
comments.
Okay, I'm gonna stop. But
Yeah, SVUDL. Also, I saw Adis's comment got deleted. I don't know what your comment was, but I love you, Adis. So
Yeah, the bot is pretty strict. It's basically like if you do too many emojis, my own bot stopped me from posting too many emojis.
I
doing
posted a
all
lot of
caps.
exclamation points. I was like, what? Why are you stopping my exclamation points? This is a form of silencing I don't appreciate. Anyway, thank you guys.
Thank you
Appreciate
all.
it.
Have a good night.
I just would like one addition. If you all would like to discuss this round with me, because I will make an RFD, and if you'd like to discuss it from your points of view, you are more than welcome to join me in the main hall in 5 minutes, and we can actually talk about the round.
Cool.